and then we're going to take any questions that anybody may have. Right, so let's start. Firstly, some stats and facts, or facts and stats. I got that the wrong way around, right? The most studied brain that we are able to study live is that of what's called a lab worm. Different worms, but they are fit into a particular space that can be easily researched. Now, those lab worms have about 302 neurons, and those neurons make about 8,000 synaptic or neuron-to-neuron connections, which is vastly different from human beings. Humans have between roughly about 85 billion to 95 billion neurons or nerve cells in the brain, which make approximately 100 trillion connections all the time, every day. Those things are happening. That's everyone's brains. So you can imagine how, just as a regular person, how chaotic it is in there. And then you get dyslexia and ADHD, particularly ADHD and autism on top of that, where the speed of which those connections are happening is way higher than the speed of what we call a neurotypical brain. So it's an ADHD, an autistic, a dyslexic, any of the neurodiverse conditions, those connections, those brains are running at a very, very high level. And there's a number of things that happen with that. The energy consumption. Your brain consumes about, as a neurotypical person, the brain consumes about 25% of the body's entire energy source. When you're somebody with a neurodiverse condition, your brain is running at a lot higher levels. That means that there's a lot more energy consumption, which is why people with ADHD and dyslexia and those neurodiverse conditions tend to have fatigue problems. So eating, the type of food you eat, the type of things you drink, the exercise you do becomes very important in order to make sure that your brain has the energy or the resources to utilize in that energy space. So that's one thing I just want you to be aware of. Our brains run at a lot higher level than than regular people. So firstly, who am I? My name's Vic Williams. For those of you who don't know, I've got an MBA with a major in economics. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, a trainer, consultant. I do create courses and I create content online. I'm a podcaster. I'm also somebody who was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD in later life. I was diagnosed with dyslexia at the age of 48 and with ADHD when I was 53. So I understand what it's like to live through almost an entire life, almost 50 years, with these conditions, but yet not know what they are and how to deal with them properly. So when I talk to you, these things that I'm going to talk with you about today come from real world experience, lived experience, and I hope to answer any questions that you have from that same perspective. Right, today, there's three things I want to accomplish. Number one, I want to educate you. I want to educate you about neurodiversity in general, but in particular dyslexia and ADHD. And the reason for that is those are the two biggest sectors or sides to the whole neurodiversity conversation. So firstly, educate. Secondly, motivate. And motivation is an intrinsic thing. It's something that comes from internal. We can talk about it, but that motivation has to come from within you. But I want to motivate you to motivate yourself almost to live at a different level and in a different way, particularly going into the workspace. And then I want to empower you. I want to empower you with the knowledge that you can take on the world. You can live, exist, thrive in a work environment that is not designed for a neurodiverse brain. So neurodiversity takes into consideration a really wide range of things. As I've mentioned already, dyslexia, ADHD, autism, which includes nowadays Asperger's, Other neurodevelopmental conditions like dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's syndrome, all those sort of things fit into the neurodiversity space. However, dyslexia and ADHD form the biggest component of those two, and that's why I'm going to be specifically focusing on that. Now, all the things I will talk about do apply to all the other areas as well. So let's talk about, oh, hang on, we've lost our remote here. Let's see, there we go. So let's talk specifically about dyslexia and ADHD and the 5 things you need to know about these two conditions. Number 1, how many people are affected by dyslexia and ADHD? It's estimated between 15 and 20% of the population are dyslexic, of which about 60% also have ADHD. About 8% of the entire population in the UK, slightly higher in other countries. It's estimated that in China at the moment, probably 15% of the population are ADHD. But as a rough gauge, about 8% of the population are actually ADHD. Those numbers are important because the vast majority of people live their lives undiagnosed in a space where they don't know, but they think they have one of those conditions or one of the other neurodevelopmental conditions, except autism. Autism does tend to be seen and recognized earlier on and diagnosed earlier on in life, whereas dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, and those sort of things tend not to be diagnosed. And diagnosis is generally, or the reason why people don't get diagnosed is because of fear of how their colleagues in the work environment may perceive them, how their friends and family may perceive them. That attitude is changing, but it's not changing fast enough. And so when you get into the workspace, you are going to have to answer some of those questions, and we'll get to those questions in a moment. Number 2, what is dyslexia and ADHD? Dyslexia and ADHD are neurodevelopmental conditions in a legal and technical term. Actually, in reality, they are evolutionary differences. The evolutionary differences because of the, in the case of dyslexia, it's the way the brain was developed or evolved or designed, depending on what you believe. But it's got particular areas that were evolved for a particular evolutionary purpose. The same is true with ADHD. It's not in reality, a developmental difference. It's a communication difference. It's the way in which the neurons in your brain work and respond to each other. So both of these conditions, as well as most of the neurodiverse conditions, are evolutionary in nature. If we have a look back at the tribes from way back in the day, and coming from South Africa, I've interacted with a lot of tribes that still live in the bush and still do things the way they were done in the past. You have, for example, in traditional Zulu cultures, they have what's called a sangoma. A sangoma is a witch doctor by any other name. And those people, when we go and have a look at them, we find that they are generally either dyslexic or ADHD. They're one of the neurodiverse conditions. And the reason why they become that medicine man, that sangoma, that priest, as some of the cultures call it, the reason why they become that is because they view the world differently. They see things differently. They see the future differently. And so they give a perspective that most regular people don't give. And that's why they're seen as special. And that's part of the evolutionary reason for dyslexia and ADHD. Both of these conditions affect the entire brain. It's not just one area. They affect the entire brain. Number 3, dyslexia and ADHD are not diseases. They are evolutionary, as I said just now, conditions, differences that have a purpose, but they are for life. You're born with dyslexia. You're generally born with ADHD. You can acquire ADHD through frontal lobe damage, and continuous concussion damage. That is possible, but it's a very small percentage of people that do. Now, there are some arguments used to be made back in the day when I was growing up that ADHD is something that you outgrow when you're about 16 or 18 years old. 16 for girls, 18 for boys was what it was thought of back in those days. The fact is, it's for life. If you're ADHD, it doesn't matter what drugs you take, doesn't matter how much hypnosis you do, you are ADHD, and it's there for life. Now, ADHD and dyslexia don't only affect the small areas. So, for example, let's talk about dyslexia. It does not just affect reading, writing, and spelling. And let me explain why I say that. Reading, writing, and spelling is only about 5,000 years old, particularly writing. Reading came from writing, and then spelling came from that afterwards. So writing is only about 5,000 years old. Our brains, the way they are today, were settled about 40,000 years ago. So no brain, whether neurodiverse or neurotypical, was ever evolved to read, write, or spell. Those are additions. And so what the brain has to do is co-opt certain areas of itself to be able to translate the images it sees as on a piece of paper or on a wall or whatever. And we now in modern society understand this to be reading and writing and spelling, or letters. Okay, those are to our brains, to our brain that was developed 40,000 years ago. Those are simply symbols. Okay. Now, you'll see an image here of a neuron. Everybody's got those neurons in their brains. Every structure is exactly the same. It's just the way in which those neurons communicate with each other when it comes to a condition like ADHD. You'll see on there's things like a myelin sheath. That myelin sheath is made out of a fatty substance that you need to ingest. So you need to take that type of fat in. Butter is a very good source. Omega-3 salmon oil is a very good source of the fat that makes up the myelin sheath. Now, if you've got ADHD, that myelin sheath breaks down a lot easier. And it's where those breaks happen that some of the miscommunication happens. It's very much like in technology. When you look at your mobile phone, we talk about a thing called frequency hopping, where in a very narrow band, nobody can access that frequency. But if you apply the principles of frequency hopping, it can jump all over the place and people can access the communication on your mobile device. That's what literally happens in your brain, is instead of the electrical signal going down the axion down to these nerve endings that where communication happens, it drops out through those broken down dendrites. That's one of the problems with ADHD. So these are not diseases, but they are life conditions. And I just also want to say this, they are not disabilities. Legally, in a legal sense, yes, they are, but in a practical sense, they are not disabilities. They are abilities if you understand them correctly. Number 4, neither dyslexia nor ADHD are related to intelligence. Just because you have a neurodiverse condition does not mean that you're unintelligent. When I was at school, because I didn't read at the same pace everybody else read at, as I said earlier, I'm dyslexic and ADHD. I didn't read at the same pace everybody else did. And so I was generally put in the corner. We had a particular cap that they used to put on our heads, and it had a little propeller on the top. And if you had that thing on, you were the dunce of the class, and we'd have to sit in the corner and act stupid. It's just because I read slower. It didn't make me less intelligent. As I said earlier, I've got an MBA with a major in economics. We need to understand that intelligence is simply the ability to acquire and apply knowledge with skill. That's all intelligence is. Nothing else. So dyslexia and ADHD are not related to intelligence. And then number 5, what do dyslexics and ADHDers bring to the table? Well, from a dyslexic point of view, there's a huge amount of strengths, but here's some of them to think about when you're going into the workplace. Very creative at problem solving. As I said earlier, it's that quote that says, the problem is not the problem. The problem is you don't know how to think about the problem. If you allow your dyslexic or your ADHD brain to expand, you will come up with amazingly creative solutions to problems that some people have had for years. All you have to do is look at people like Elon Musk, for example, coming up with, I mean, who would have ever thought to create a car like a Tesla? I don't drive one, but who would have ever thought of doing that? Nobody. Nobody could come up with the solutions that made it work. And then suddenly everybody else jumped on the bandwagon. He's ADHD. That's why he acts like he does. He's also autistic. That's why he acts like he does. He also has Asperger's syndrome. Again, he acts like he does. So it's not abnormal to have a creative problem-solving brain as a dyslexic or ADHD. We have big picture thinking. Me, for example, don't give me the detail of a thing. I'll come up with a big picture, hand it off to somebody else, and let them deal with the detail. Just remember that you are not abnormal. You just have a different way of thinking. We are highly resilient and determined to make things happen. And the reason for that is because most of us have grown up through our lives being battered down. You're not good enough. You can't think properly, yada, yada, yada. You're resilient. You have determination. These are things we bring to the table. When it comes to big issues, we know we can be resilient and push through to the end. We have an out-of-the-box perspective, strong visual and spatial skills. We can see things that need to be seen in spaces. ADHD strengths, high energy and enthusiasm. In my case, I go to bed at 12 o'clock every night and I'm awake at 5:30. It's been like that my whole life. Loads of energy. I'm the last one to leave the party. Hyper focus on things that we're interested in, creative and innovative thinking, adaptability, flexibility. Risk taking can be a problem. We are willing to take risks and have an entrepreneurial spirit, but risk taking can involve how we spend money, how we view money. So you've got to take it on both sides. So here's 5 things you need to know about entering the workplace as somebody with a neurodiverse condition. Number 1, written communication and information processing is a problem. As I said earlier, I tend to read slower than others. I pick up the information quicker. I just don't process it and have the ability to communicate it as fast as somebody else. But I pick it up a lot quicker. So if that's something that you'll face in the workplace, be aware of it. Work on the skills to make that better. And you can improve that. Number 2, time management and organization skills. If you come into my office, it's an absolute nightmare. My desk looks like a dog's breakfast, and I'm really rubbish at timekeeping. I've worked on that, but remember, timekeeping becomes very important, or time management becomes very important, as do organization skills when you're in the workspace. So work on finding solutions to those problems. Number 3, managing distractions and disruptions. My word, I work from home. I've got a window next to my desk, and I'll be working away and a bird will fly past. Oh, look at the bird. And 10 minutes are gone before I've able to get back to my computer to carry on working. So when you get into the workplace, you're going to have to learn the skills of managing those distractions and disruptions. You'll have colleagues around you that will want to talk. How do you get back to your work very quickly? It is said that it takes between 20 and 25 minutes for the average person to get back into work or the same space they were in prior to a disruption from a colleague. For somebody with ADHD, it can take up to 40 to 45 minutes to get back into that same space. You've got to learn how to, or you're going to have to learn how to deal with that. Navigating social interactions and overcoming stigmas. As I said earlier, one of the things that you will find is that people have a negative perception of people with neurodiverse conditions. And so they are generally make it more difficult for you to enter the social interaction in a business. So you're going to have to figure ways of navigating those social interactions and overcoming that stigma. And then the last one, and this is probably a big one, it comes to disclosure and negotiating reasonable adjustments. So disclosure is all about, do I tell my new boss that I'm dyslexic and ADHD? Do I tell my boss I'm autistic? Do I tell my boss I'm in this neurodiverse space? Or don't I? Do I just back off? And if I do tell them, how do I negotiate these things called reasonable adjustments? Within the law here in the UK, companies have to, by law, do these things called reasonable adjustments. For example, a height adjustable desk, a chair that accommodates that height adjustment. Are you given regular space to go outside and just take a walk? Are you given regular opportunity to put your work aside and just go and think about something different? These are all called reasonable adjustments, and they are part of the law, but you can only access them if you disclose your condition. How do you go about dealing with that? And so those are 5 things that I think that are really important for you to know as a dyslexic or ADHD person or anybody in the neurodiverse space moving into the workplace. However, there's something more important than that, and that is the 3 big factors that affect people with neurodiverse conditions entering into the workspace. All of those other things are good to understand and to know. However, these are the 3 biggest factors. Number 1, your mindsets. There's not just one mindset. An opinion is a mindset. It's an alternative word for mindset. Okay, so you've got opinions, and we all have opinions about a wide range of things. Each of those is a mindset. And when you enter into the workplace, as somebody with a neurodiverse condition, you're going to have to change your mindset about the way things are, about the things that are done to you and the way you do things. So what are your mindsets? How do you see things, and how are you going to have to adapt those mindsets to fit into the workspace? Are you going to be in that place where you're the ideas person but leave alone the minutiae? Or are you that person that's going to pick up on that stuff and leave the big ideas to somebody else? Typically, when you're entering into the workspace for the first time, nobody wants to hear your ideas, but you do have solutions. So how do you navigate that process? Again, that's a mindset of how you put yourself in front of people to explain things. Number 2 is habits. What are the habits that you have today that are not going to serve you in the workspace tomorrow? It's said that the habits that have got you where you are today are not the same habits that will take you into the future. So what are the habits that you have that you need to let go in order to progress into the work environment and to be the very best you can possibly be, not for the company that you're going to work for, but for you? What are those habits? Around eating, around drinking, around sleeping, around work ethic, around getting in on time, around time management, all those things. What are those habits you're going to have to let go, and what are the habits that you're going to have to develop that's going to make you better? And then thirdly is this thing called flow. Flow, I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but it's a psychological phenomenon that happens when we are, and this is for everybody, whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical, where you're able to just zone in and focus on doing a job, so that when you look at your watch, an hour, 2 hours, or you think it's 5 minutes that's gone, but in fact, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours have actually gone. That's called getting into flow. You can also use that, the terminology productivity. Now, one of the things that I've developed is a way in which neurodiverse people can enter into and exit from flow. As I mentioned earlier, it can take up to 40 to 45 minutes for you to get back into the mind you had before you were interrupted or disrupted. However, if you work with what's called your ultradian rhythm, so we all have probably heard of a thing called a circadian rhythm. A circadian rhythm is the 24-hour cycle that everything in the universe goes through. It's often called the sleep-wake cycle, and your body does that automatically. There are certain times that your body will release certain chemicals to make you feel tired. There's times that your body will release certain chemicals to tell your brain to start waking up, or tell your body to start waking up. That's all part of your circadian rhythm. But within that circadian rhythm is another rhythm called an ultradian rhythm. That's a period of 90 to 120 minutes of peaks and valleys throughout the day where you will be high energy consumption, high ability, high focus, and times where you'll be in a valley where you are low energy consumption, low focus, low ability to do anything. And you'll find that if you monitor your day, you'll go through this ultradian rhythm cycle. It's not something you can do anything about. It's the way your body is evolved. And there was a long study done where a bunch of scientists went and lived in a cave for a year. They sealed off the cave. They had no access to outside light. They had access to external oxygen so that the toxins didn't build up. They had food delivered to them at odd and random times, so they never knew what the time was. They didn't have watches or clocks. For a year, they lived in this completely dark environment in a cave. And they were monitored. And the monitor showed that their circadian rhythm, the ultradian rhythm stayed exactly the same. Nothing changed. Dopamine, serotonin, cortisol, all these chemicals worked exactly the same. All that happened was they became more regular because they weren't interrupted by the things that we have in our modern society. And so they were able to establish and understand better how the circadian rhythm and the ultradian rhythms work within our bodies. Now, if you can understand your ultradian rhythm and do your best work when you're at a high level within that 90 to 120 minute segment, and have a break when you're in that low environment, you will be so much more productive. So one of the things that we teach is that if you can understand when your lowest point is at in the morning, right at the beginning of your day, you'll then understand where you're on the upcycle. As that upcycle starts, you start a 20-minute focused work segment. So you focus on stuff, and then at the end of 20 minutes, you take a 10-minute break. You go and do something completely different. You go and fiddle with your phone, you go to the toilet, you go make a cup of coffee. Then you come back and you work for another 20 minutes, focus time, bang. Then you take another 10-minute break. But now you're starting to come off the top of the curve and you're starting to head down into the valley. So you do 20 minutes on the up, 10 minutes break, 20 minutes right at the top of the curve, have a break, and then 20 minutes on the way down. At the end of that third 20 minutes, you have a long break. So a 30-minute break where you go and have your lunch, go and have your tea, whatever you want to call it, whatever you do, have a complete break. And you will find that your productivity level will increase, your energy consumption will stay the same, but your tiredness, that feeling of lethargy, will completely disappear. Now, this is one of the reasonable adjustments that you may want to consider asking your boss when you go into employment to make, so that you can work in that kind of rhythm with your body's natural energy and ability to do things. That is called flow. So an alternative word for flow is productivity. So mindsets, habits, and flow. Key to remember, it's not just one mindset, we have multiple. Key to remember, we don't just have one habit, we have multiple. What is serving you now, and what do you need to serve you in the future? And then flow. Work with your ultradian rhythm, and you will be the best employee anybody can have. And with that, we're done. Is that okay? We did say half an hour, so it's now 1:45. If that works, we've got, what, 10 more minutes?
Yeah.
And we can do any questions that anybody has.
Yeah.
And then we can take it from there.
Absolutely.
Right. So do you have any questions? Anybody got any questions? Just pop them in the chat, and we'll take it from there.
Somebody typing?
Yeah. While somebody's busy typing or asking a question, one of the things I did come across the other day is somebody said to me, "So Vic, what habits do I need to get rid of that are good for me now?" I was talking at a different college campus, and what are the habits I need for the future? And so one of the things I did say to them is that one of the best habits you can get into is to understand, with this understanding of your ultradian rhythm, is to understand when you wake up in the morning and what are the first things you do as you wake up. So having a good morning routine would serve you well. So in my case, for example, I get up at 5:30. First thing I do is I go downstairs, grab a cup of coffee, and my dog and myself go and sit in my office. And the first thing I do in the office is I grab my journal and I have a brain dump. I don't journal, I just dump everything that's in my brain. So it's a brain unload. One of the things that ADHD people tend to do is at night build up all these thoughts that are going on in their heads. When you wake up, you suddenly, it's a rush of things and you don't know what to do with it all. So if you have a brain dump, you just unload onto a piece of paper in a notebook. You just scribble it all down. I never go back to those things. I just write them down. Sometime down the road, one of those ideas will jump out again, and I'll make a note of it. And then you'll suddenly see there's a pattern happening. Every day you're writing the same things down. Okay, cool. That might be some idea that I need to develop. That idea I would then take and write in my other journal, which is I'm now structuring my thoughts. So I've got two journals. One, which is just a brain dump. Those, when I finish that book, I throw them away. Doesn't matter. But my other journal, where I now am journaling, where I'm writing down my conscious thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, all that sort of stuff, while I'm writing that down, that's more structured. Now, I've got my journals going back to 1979. Okay. And the key here is not to journal by typing. The key here is to journal by writing. There's a lot of research that's come out to show that people with neurodiverse conditions and other people, but particularly us, our brains have a different way of remembering things. And the more we actually physically write with a pen or a pencil, the more our brains remember. And the more we're able to take those ideas and expand on them. So the first thing I do, cup of coffee in my office, brain dump for just 5 minutes. Okay. Then I journal for 10 minutes. So now I'm kind of at 6:45. Finish off my coffee, play with my dog for about 5 or 10 minutes. Again, it's a nice brain unload. Okay. And then I go for a walk. So I get changed and I go for a long walk. So I'm doing a 10-kilometer walk every day. So one of my health things that I'm working on is I walk for 10 kilometers every day. I'll go and do a 2-kilometer walk. That's not far. 2 kilometers, there and back. Headphones in, and I listen to something that's upbuilding, something that's encouraging, something that's empowering. By the time I get home, it's kind of 6:30, and then I can get on with my day. But I've unloaded my brain, I've taken in some good stuff, and I've got some exercise done.
I love that idea as well of starting your day, taking the pressure off.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think there's this thing, isn't there? This pressure to get up and go on it.
Go. Absolutely.
Fire.
Yeah.
But actually, I love that idea. Just being like, no, I'm just going to absolutely just chill, clear my mind.
Yeah.
And actually, for any of us, whether, as you say, neurodiverse and neurotypical,
yeah.
what better way to set yourself up for the day?
Absolutely.
With a clear head, rather than trying to hit everything at 1,000 miles per hour.
Yeah.
This complete fog.
Absolutely. And what that does is it actually starts your ultradian rhythm. Okay. So when you wake up, just before you start waking up, your body will release cortisol when it's at its coldest. Starts releasing cortisol. A certain amount. That cortisol tells your brain and your body it's time to start the wake up cycle.
Yeah.
So as you're starting to wake up, now you become fully conscious, you open your eyes, maybe the alarm goes off, you climb out of bed. Now you're almost at the top of that first cycle, because where it releases the cortisol, you're at the bottom of the cycle. So now you're almost at the top of the cycle, you're taking advantage of it. You're brain dumping, you're getting all the stuff out, you're journaling, and you're going for your walk, which takes you down into that dip. Now you can have your breakfast.
Yeah.
You're at the bottom. By the time you're now getting to go to work, you're back on the up cycle. And so you're starting to work with that ultradian rhythm. But it is so important for people with ADHD, particularly and autism as well, that first 10, 15 minutes, just unload your brain, take the pressure off, and you don't have to go.
I'd be really interested to know. So in a traditional workplace, if you like, where you are employed, so you're to one extent or another kind of on a bit of a schedule.
On a treadmill,
Have you got any kind of tips for how somebody can work more with their own rhythm, so they're kind of honouring what their brain and their body needs, whilst kind of juggling that with this expectation of perhaps being in a certain place at a certain time, or being in a meeting here or doing this there. What have you got any thoughts on?
For people that are neurodiverse, again, that goes back to these reasonable adjustments that you can negotiate with your boss. If you and I advocate for full disclosure. Okay. A lot of people say, "Oh, don't disclose because it's going to inhibit your work and growth and all that." I don't believe it at all. If you tell the person that you're working for who you are and the way your brain works and what you need to be highly productive, you can negotiate that change in rhythm. If you can explain to them that you need to work with that ultradian rhythm, most employers are going to go, yeah, that's cool, because that's part of this whole legal environment called reasonable adjustments. However, I think it also should be part of your conversation during the recruitment process. Problem that comes with that is most recruiters and HR managers don't understand neurodiversity. So again, it's incumbent on us as people with neurodiverse conditions to educate, continuously educate. This is who I am. I filled in your form. I don't really know what I filled in because I'm dyslexic. I have ADHD. This is who I am. This is what I'm not good at. This is what I'm really good at. In between, we can work that out. But if you're upfront, then you can get the right job to do the right thing that works for you.
It's kind of owning that, I guess, and being authentic gets bandied around a lot.
Absolutely.
But being really just, this is me, this is the good bit, this is the maybe not so good bit. This is how I can work for you in this business. This is what I'm going to give you.
And this is the outcomes you'll get from me. If you can, you see, the big thing is that most companies want an outcome. They don't want time at your desk. So a business owner, a boss, a manager, director, whatever, comes to you and says, do this. I need it by tomorrow morning. They don't care how you break up your time to get that job done. They just want the job done. So if you sell them on your ability to give them the outcome, you can set it up any way you want. And it's about that negotiating piece. And most companies, 20 years ago, nobody was interested in negotiating with you. This is the job. You don't like it. There's the door. Hit the road, Jack. But now we're in a very different environment, particularly since COVID. Most people are able to go, okay, boss, this is my story. This is who I am. This is what I do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Cool.
And that comes on really nicely. So Dee has a message, I think, in the chat. How am I able to change mindset at the workplace or people, so in academia, work, family, without feeling that I need to change myself as a person? How do you approach that?
Okay, so the first thing to understand is mindsets are yours, not somebody else's. I can't change other people's mindsets by telling them what I want them to do, by giving them the responsibility of changing my mindset. I've got to take responsibility. So I've got to recognize my mindsets in particular environments. For example, how can I say that this well? So I don't. I'm not the kind of person that shuts up. Okay. If there's something that I see, I will tell you.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's never done from a malicious point of view. It's never done from the perspective of you're bad, I'm good. It's always from the perspective I'm telling you this because I care.
Yeah.
I want to see something better, and this is my perspective on better. So I've changed my mindset, to the way I communicate. And because I've changed the way in which I communicate, the way people receive it is different. And then they may change their mindset in response.
Yeah.
So, for example, I was with a client earlier this year, and we were in a manufacturing space up in Stoke-on-Trent, and it's a foundry, so it's very noisy, very hot, very dirty, and there was one guy who he was really good at his job, but he couldn't take the heat of the furnace. Okay, even though he had all the gear on, he couldn't take the heat of the furnace. And their mindset was, he's just got to suck it up. That's his job. Suck up that heat and deal with it.
Yeah.
And so I was able to recognize the problem, and I went and had a conversation with him. And I thought, okay, if we allow him to only work for short periods of time, take that space, move away, go and do something else that's equally as useful, equally as valuable, but he's not exposed to that heat. So heat exchanges in short pieces, short bursts, instead of 6 hours at a time or 5 hours at a time, he's going to be that much more productive. And having that conversation with the production manager and the production director helped them to understand his value as a human.
Yeah.
And they were able to go, okay, let's interchange, let's swap guys around. And by swapping, not just him, but everybody, they rotated them through the furnace.
Yeah.
Their productivity level went up by 18%. So in answer to that question, it's not I'm changing other people's mindsets. I'm changing mine. Changing my mindset doesn't change me as a human. Doesn't change me as a person. Makes me better.
Yeah. It's a little bit like that, the thing we were talking about before the session started. You can control you can change.
Absolutely.
You can't necessarily.
You can't change anything else. Yeah.
You can't force somebody to think in a different way.
Absolutely.
But you can do that internal work.
Yeah.
And as you said with your communication,
yeah,
what that then reflects back through others, and the response you get starts to make big changes.
Makes big changes. Absolutely. So a mentor many years ago said to me, there's two things you can influence and two things you can't. You can't change other people's attitudes, and you can't change their actions. What you can change is your attitude and your actions. If you change your stuff, other people will change in response.
Yeah.
And all you can hope for is a better change in their response.
I think it is then it's finding a way to do that still feels true to you, doesn't it? So
absolutely.
You don't feel like you're having to change yourself as a person. You're
absolutely.
Still upholding your
values.
Your beliefs,
absolutely.
Values,
yeah.
You know, what feels right for you.
Yeah.
You can still make those shifts.
Absolutely.
To make a better version
of yourself. Yeah. And again, picking up on that point, it's also really important to remember that everybody has an opinion. And as I said earlier, mindsets are based on your opinions. Mindset is purely the filter through which you view the world.
Yeah.
An opinion is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So literally, mindsets and opinions are the same thing. Okay. If I have an opinion that this carpet is various tones of gray, and your opinion is it's various tones of brown, that's your opinion and my opinion. Doesn't make it fact.
Yeah.
So just because I have an opinion of the way I see the world does not make it fact. Same is true with other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Which means I don't have to change their opinion, I've got to change mine. Not to suit them, but to suit more reality.
Yeah.
Because if I look at the carpet in a little bit of a different way, actually I can see it's different shades of brown.
Yeah.
But if I stand over here, it's different shades of grey. So opinions and mindsets are about positioning. How do you look at something? How do you see it? You're sitting over there, I'm standing over here. If we look at this desk and I ask you to describe this desk, and I'm standing over here and I'm looking at the desk and I'm asked to describe it, we're going to give two different descriptions.
Yeah.
It's about perspective. Where do you stand in relation to that thing? And it goes back to what I said earlier. The problem is not the problem. The problem is that most people don't know how to think about the problem.
Thank you. If you don't mind for time.
Yeah.
Question here. So Jason asked, do you have any tips about how to start to get into the practice of working within your ultradian rhythm? I like the idea, but I'm not sure where to start without falling behind on everything I need to do in the day.
Okay, so the best way to discover how your ultradian rhythm runs is to turn off your alarm clock. Okay, turn off the alarm clock. Do it on a weekend when you're not pressured to wake up at a certain time.
Yeah.
Go to bed when you first feel tired. So at night, you'll start feeling tired. The minute you start feeling tired, your brain is releasing melatonin, which tells your body it's time to now sleep.
Yeah.
When you feel that, go to bed and sleep. Make a note of the time. Okay? Because when your brain releases melatonin, you're right at the very bottom of that ultradian rhythm. Okay? So now you fall asleep, your body will keep on going through that ultradian rhythm. At one point in that ultradian rhythm, you'll get into REM sleep, okay, your deepest form of sleep. Yeah. And then immediately after REM sleep, you'll get to the bottom of that ultradian rhythm and your brain will release cortisol. Now it's telling your body to wake up. The first time that you open your eyes, naturally, the alarm clock's off, all distractions off, everything that was going to wake you up is off. You start waking up. The minute you open your eyes, make a note of that time. And do this a few weeks, few days in a row until you've got an understanding of the time your body releases melatonin and the time your body releases cortisol. The time when your body releases cortisol is the beginning at the very bottom of your first ultradian cycle. Now you can start to understand your peaks and valleys through the day. Once you've understood that starting point, keep a notebook with you, the same notebook where you make that wake up and sleep time. And then when you're feeling at your highest points, make a note of the time. When you're feeling at your lowest points, you'll be sitting at your desk thinking, oh, I'm dragging through today. Make a note of that time. Don't go and drink coffee to wake yourself up or eat a chocolate or have something sugary. Just make a note of the time and allow your body to just now go through that natural. You'll sit at your desk. You'll feel like I'm dragging. And then 5 minutes later, you feel like, oh, okay, I'm good now. Yeah. I can make this happen. Make a note of the time when you're feeling at your highest energy. And over a period of time, it takes about 6 months to get these timings right. Yeah. Once you've got that, you'll understand your ultradian rhythm. That's the best way I can recommend to do it.
Everything now.
Yeah.
Are there any apps or anything that can help with logging? I'm just thinking if somebody's not brilliant at kind of remembering things, are there ways that you
There are a number of apps available. None of them really do a very good job or as good a job as writing it down in a notebook.
Yeah.
But there are a number, and I can send you through there off the top of my head. I can't think of them right now. but there are a number of them that you can get that are on both Android and iPhone. The problem with that, even with watches, is they're not that accurate. So you'll have like an iPhone watch or an Android watch that tells you how much REM sleep you've had. It's all it's doing is measuring your body temperature. That's all it's doing. It can't do anything else. It may recognize your heartbeat, but your heartbeat doesn't indicate REM sleep. The only thing that can indicate REM sleep is brain waves. So what of the 5 brain waves you're in, that'll determine whether you're in REM sleep, and your watch can't do that. So yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that's given you
helpful advice. Thank you.
Awesome.
Everyone has found it
Love it.
really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such an educational speech.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Love it. Right, and we can turn this off.